What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the next episode of How to Get Away with Staffing. My name is Colin LeBeau, president at Foxhire, employer of record service here in the United States. And I've got Matt Robison, our director of sales. Hey, Matt, what's
Hey
up?
there. How much? How you doing?
Not doing bad.
Good.
Maybe
Good.
not as good as you out there on the West Coast right now.
On the West Coast right now, yes, enjoying some green. It's been very nice.
Nice. Awesome,
Yeah.
man. Well, for those that don't know, Matt's team focuses on supporting our customer base, which happens to be a large portion of them, staffing and recruiting agencies. And today we're going to talk about why staffing and recruiting agencies in the United Kingdom should consider expanding to the US. And Matt, I think that actually is a common theme for you guys. You guys speak to quite a few UK-based staffing firms, right?
We do, which was a little bit of a surprise to me. I don't know that I was expecting that initially when I took the job, but it's we're seeing that it's such a competitive market over there, and obviously it's an island, so there's only so much space.
Yeah.
So we are seeing a real desire to kind of expand and grow outside of the UK. And so we do have conversations quite often with UK staffing companies that are looking to expand into the US.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. And I think it's becoming more and more of a common occurrence. I think people are becoming more aware that it's easy to do. Obviously, there's daunting tasks to and challenges to overcome for UK-based staffing firms to even enter the US market, but solutions that exist today, like EOR services, make it easier to just turn this service on. But I think to your point, maybe starting with the numbers would be helpful for people to understand just how much of a difference there is between the US market and the UK market. The US staffing market is roughly $200 billion, about 198, according to American Staffing Association. And Canada is about 15 to 20 billion. So that's quite a bit of revenue to go around. And I think that although we saw a decrease in staffing spend this year in response to COVID, overall, we're going to see continued growth there. So definitely a big opportunity. And compared to the UK, what's the UK numbers, Matt?
It's estimated anywhere between 40 and 50 billion pounds. So I guess with the exchange rate, we're looking at more like 60 billion
Yeah,
US dollars roughly.
gotcha. So about one third of what
Hmm.
it is that the US market has.
Right, right.
Yeah. And the US market isn't as competitive as the UK, I think, to your point. Perhaps it's just a little bit less mature as far as how many years it's been, uh, I guess, open as a market. But it is definitely a mature market in general, maybe not as mature as the UK is. Can you talk a little bit about the barrier to entry, Matt? And, I know your team solves some of those challenges with UK staffing firms, but why is the barrier to entry a little bit lower than maybe people expect?
I think, well, let me say this first off. If a UK company were to come into the US and try to do it on their own, I don't know that the barrier to entry would be low.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
everything that I'm going to say is if you use a partner like an EOR, because an employer of record service already has those things in place, they understand the laws.
right.
It's actually quite complex. We've got 50 states that act like 50 countries. Like there, you have to know the laws and in each state. So it actually can be very difficult. Now, if you already use an EOR, though, the great thing is you can kind of rely on their expertise. And they, a lot of employer of records, such as Foxhire, we've been around for 30 plus years. So we have that expertise. I know there's plenty of other employer records as well that have an existing expertise. We've been doing it for quite some times, have access to all 50 states, multiple industries, things like that. So it's very similar to kind of what the UK offers with umbrella companies in what we do.
Yep.
And so it really is a plug and play if you partner with somebody who's already doing it, because they bring their expertise and you bring your recruiting expertise and you can help find those roles and then place them with an employer of record.
Yep. Yeah, and I think you mentioned the markets. What are some of the good markets that maybe UK firms are already operating in that they could just expand into the US with already, that maybe they have candidates for and even
Yeah.
existing clients even?
I mean, IT is a huge one. I think, you see that in both countries quite a bit. That's a little bit of a lower barrier to entry too, because it tends to be you just find a skilled person, you can place them pretty quickly. Um, Healthcare
Hmm.
is quite extensive in the US. Obviously, we have privatized healthcare, and it's different than the UK, but
Right.
there's always a need for um, for qualified people in healthcare. And so we saw that during COVID, especially. There was a huge spike in the need for nurses, and um, so there are tons of opportunity there. That's actually an area that Fox Air's kind of focuses on. We have a registered nurse who is our director of operations and can help us with that, because there are different licensing requirements depending on the state as well. So that's certainly something you would want to be aware of,
Right.
want to be working with somebody who's familiar with that, not just something that you would want to jump into. Education's another great one. There's a lot of kind of roles that are done in the school that aren't necessarily hired by the school. And so, we have those. I'm trying to think of, I'm drawing a blank right now, Colin. What are some of those roles?
Yeah. Like speech language
Yeah,
pathology or physical therapists or school aides or, just people that are support staff that aren't the teachers themselves typically.
exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
There's a lot of that.
those are some of the bigger areas I would recommend.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what surprised me was the healthcare. There's a lot of healthcare focused staffing firms and recruitment agencies in the UK. And given that, like you said, US has a privatized healthcare system and not all other countries do,
Mhm.
you don't always see as much of opportunity to support that industry in other countries. But we've actually seen a lot of success with specifically laboratory and life sciences and pharmaceuticals type placements in the US from UK-based firms. There's actually
Mhm.
quite a few UK-based firms that focus on pharma and life sciences. So that's definitely one to consider, given that the US healthcare market is so big.
Yeah, for sure. No, we have seen some success there. We've worked with several UK partners in those markets
Yeah.
specifically.
Yeah, think about positions like laboratory technologists, phlebotomists, research associates to work on clinical trials, things of
Mhm.
that nature. I've seen a lot of success there from UK-based firms. So
Yeah.
that one definitely surprised me. But I think also any of these industries are a little bit more easy to expand into, given that you're working in a country, the US, that has a similar model to the UK,
Mhm.
and is also culturally accepting of the temporary and contract staffing industry, which not all countries are that way. In fact,
Mhm.
there's a lot of them that aren't. So the UK or the US is a really good opportunity for UK to hit the ground running quickly. And it doesn't hurt that the majority of those in the US are English speaking as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, that's a huge point that um, does need to be made. Is it's the same language.
Yeah,
Time zone wise, it's not, the UK 5 hours ahead of the East Coast, so there's still overlap in the working day, and so I think those are other reasons that it just tends to work really well for some of our UK staffing partners.
for sure. Yeah, and if you break down the staffing market, the two biggest staffing markets in the US are IT and healthcare. So that makes up roughly a little bit less than um, let's see, a half of the entire staffing market itself. IT is about 35 to 40 billion in annual revenue, and healthcare is about 50 to 55 billion in annual revenue. So
Wow.
that is almost healthcare's market the same size as UK's entire market.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, agree.
big opportunity there to be successful, even if it's not in clinical. A lot of the
Mhm.
big healthcare systems do need to leverage IT workers, HR support, just any other office-based role can really be good opportunities for those UK-based organizations.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a great point. We work with a lot of healthcare systems and are able to place non-clinical roles, like you said. So it's just such a huge, we're reaching the baby boomer generation. They're retiring, they're getting older, they're needing healthcare. So it's not something that's going to go away quickly. In
No.
fact, I think it's just going to ramp up even more over the next few years as the population is aging, especially, like I said, those baby boomers.
Yep, and that's happening across the country. And you mentioned earlier that it's 50 different states, but some people
Right.
in the staff would like to call it the 50 countries of the United States. So
Hmm.
can you talk a little bit about that and why we see so much variation across those states and what that does to a staffing firm as far as requiring them to comply and do different things across different states?
Yeah, it's just I don't know any easy way to say it. They're just every state operates slightly differently. And so, especially if you look at the more technical roles, the ones that require licensing of any kind, to hire a nurse in California or Illinois is drastically different than to hire a nurse in Texas or Montana. Like there's just so many different rules, and so many different regulations. On top of that, you've got even within the states, there's municipalities that require certain uh, whether it's documentation or they just have different rules with time cards, with timesheets, and how you pay the people and what qualifies for overtime. Like there is just such a vast
Yep.
difference. I mean, there's onboarding requirements that are different. You have to do this training in New York City that you don't have to do in other places. So it's one of those things that uh, it just it's dangerous not to be an expert in because you could really get in trouble
Right.
um, if you're not following the local laws wherever that person is working.
Yep. Yeah, that's the biggest thing. It's just it puts you at risk if you don't do it properly. So there are some trouble states that I would call out that usually impose stricter or more variation
Hmm.
as far as payroll laws or compliance related laws. California being one of them. I think actually SIA just came out with um, it was a list of the staffing firm concerns or compliance concerns, which was a section of their North American staffing survey.
Hmm.
And geographically, they called out which locations in the U.S. are the most concerning, right? And California by far was the largest answer. Of 56% of the people that took that question answered California, followed by the United States as a whole, which was second, which is interesting. And
Hmm.
then Illinois was third, and Pennsylvania was next. And so definitely, we call out California, Illinois. They're the two toughest as far as like difference in how things operate there, compliance, all that type of stuff. Then New York, Massachusetts, Washington, New Jersey, a lot of the East Coast states are similar as far as the levels of compliance requirements, but
Hmm.
just not as uh, high of a volume. And there's big differences in California that apply that just don't apply elsewhere. So
Hmm.
absolutely would say those would be ones if you're going to operate in. There's big opportunity, in California, but
Hmm.
also bigger risks as well.
Well, and I would even say add that in the US, we have recruiting companies that we work with
Yeah,
that might have their own entities in multiple states, but they choose not to work in directly in certain states like California. And so they might just use an employer of record service like us for those tough states. The
correct.
ones that they're just like, I don't want anything to do with California. I don't want New York, Illinois, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Uh, so it's just if you're not a true expert, it is very difficult to work in those
Yeah.
areas.
Absolutely, yeah. And there are tools that help you comply with those things. The partners that you might work with in EOR or otherwise might require you guys to gather certain information, but hopefully the goal there is to shield you from risk and take on a lot of that. A lot of it's just reporting. A lot of it is just a lot of like data gathering and reporting back to the states to basically get the seal of approval that we're doing the right things the right way. And that takes a lot of time away from that agency so they can focus on what they do best, which
Mhm.
is finding people, right? And I know you work with a lot of staffing firms in the UK, Matt, and have talked to them about these types of ideas, but um, have any of them expressed I guess difficulty in finding people for US based roles? Or is that something that they just are naturally able to accomplish given
Mhm.
the culture that exists across both locations?
Country. I think there's always a learning curve. There are some cultural differences between the US and the UK. Now, not that many, which is why we're talking about this. It's certainly
Yeah.
easier to reach out to work in the US market if you're from the UK than perhaps, Germany or a country with a different language, different culture, that kind of thing.
Yep.
What we've found typically is there is a little bit of a learning curve. It takes a little bit of time just to understand the market better, to understand the employees, things like that. But after that kind of hump is over, they seem to be pretty happy and able to succeed in this market.
Yeah. I agree. Definitely a ramp. You most likely won't enter the US market by accident. You're going to have to make a dedicated effort. A
Yeah.
big client could pull you in. There's a lot of big organizations over in the UK that have a big US presence. I think BMS, Bristol Myers Squibb is an example. Even in the healthcare space, they've got a big UK presence. They've got a big US presence. So if you're serving them, maybe they bring you over and they say, "Hey, can you find us people in this location in the US?" That could happen, but most likely you're going to see opportunities that you want to be able to say yes to, but you can't. And that's where you just got to make that dedicated decision to go execute that ramp and ultimately build a brand in the US. But back office solutions do make it easier. And it's not as difficult as other countries. So if you're looking to grow, this is a great place to do it. And I think you can follow in the footsteps of a lot of other organizations. So I know we have some examples of organizations that we've worked with, and they've been successful doing so.
Right, right.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Anything you would add, Matt, for those that are considering expanding to the US from the UK?
The only other thing I was thinking of that we've seen, the reason that this is helpful, aside from the UK having a limited market in comparison, just a smaller market,
Yeah.
is it's just one of those things that's good to hedge your bets with the economy. And if you can spread out, geographically, it just helps mitigate some of those economic. Obviously, our economies are tied together, the US and the UK, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they are, you know, both down at the exact same time. In the US, we've talked about 50 states, like things might be struggling in California, but Texas is having a boom. So there's these mini markets within the US, and that's
Right.
true, by the way. Like Texas is experiencing a huge boom. They're very
Absolutely.
pro business. So all these companies are moving there. They're hiring more employees. Even Texas, as big as it is, only has so many. So they might go remote for those positions as well. It just gives those firms an opportunity to expand and to mitigate the risk of not having enough people in multiple markets. So it really is like, it's one country, but as we've said ad nauseum, like it's 50 more countries that you're adding to your repertoire.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And to your point, there's a massive talent pool in the United States, right? Like a lot of great, talented people across different sectors. So the odds that you can find somebody to take a role with your client is also high, which is a great, thing, because you are selling on both sides of that fence. So you don't just need companies that want your services, but you also need those candidates that can, deliver for your clients. And so, the US has both of those things. And to your point, Austin, Texas is a great example. Experienced a massive boom, technology-driven boom specifically. I think that has peaked or is probably peaking right now, and is going down. Probably will start to go down, but other localities will start to grow in its place, right?
Oh, yeah.
Nashville, I know multiple cities in Florida have experienced big booms like Tampa, like Miami. So
Atlanta.
you've got multiple places to go find opportunity.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
So if you're listening to this and you're like, I would love to learn more about this, see if I can start doing this, and you're in the UK, please reach out to us. Otherwise, there's tons of other solutions and help that can make this easier for you. So I would urge you to do that. And we hope you found this valuable. We'll see you next time on How to Get Away with Staffing. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.